It was approaching Christmas time, and the Angry Scotland team were sat round the fire in their snuggy-wuggy little cottage, where they record all of their episodes. And there was laughter and quaffs, but soon the conversation turned, as it often does at this time of year, to the subject of roaming charges.
What's the guy's name?
Michael Matheson, health secretary, aren't he? Having managed phone contracts inside companies, it happens all the time. People do it, they don't turn the roaming off. Even when they get the text saying turn the fucking roaming off, they don't do it. And then they start watching Netflix or football matches on it, and they total up a huge bill. But I believe how we did it was, to be issued a company form, they had to sign a document which basically said, if you go abroad, fucking turn that off, or you have to pay it back. He's tried to get it paid back by the taxpayer.
Where's he sitting watching football? Probably in a pub or in the hotel, where he could have actually just connected to the fucking Wi-Fi.
Well, the problem is that he says that it wasn't him, it was his kids that done it. He
blamed his kids.
You'd never live that down, would you? Front page news because you nicked your dad's iPad to watch a football game. Well, that was part of the thing. His explanation, he said that he wasn't fully truthful about what his explanation was about using the iPad, because he knew as his kids and he didn't want them to be brought up in the press and stuff. The kids should done like a thing at like the end of the garden with the press are all there outside and the kids had to read out a statement. I've been very bad. You sort of expect a lot of screw ups at like your top executive kind of level businesses. They expect your CEO to reverse his expensive hire car in a lamppost and all this. So you kind of got that baked in that you expect folk to screw up and do stupid things. What you don't expect is them to lie about it. If, right at the start he'd said, oh, I'm really sorry, when my kids get hold of it, watch the football, I'll pay it all back over the next like 3 years.
Yeah, I'm really sorry.
Everything about that. That's a funny story about your kids storing the iPad. That's actually a laugh. Yeah. Folk would have forgotten about it a couple of weeks later. I don't know about Humza, I'm impressed with him in terms of leadership, but you know, that's probably a separate sidebar. I think he's... Well, in that example, like the Michael Matheson thing, I think if you wanted to show you're a bit stronger, you would have just booted him right away, and then he probably would have only spent a couple of months in the back benches. I thought he did pretty well handling the whole Gaza situation. Yeah. Family actually been over there, because it's been quite easy for him to like get really emotional about it, and say something out of order or whatever, or just, not nuanced enough. But I thought actually when he spoke about it, came across really well, and Yeah, that's fair. But when you sort of look back at his actual experience, it's pretty much like went to uni, became parliamentary researcher, and is now running the country. And you're like, oh, it's a bit odd, isn't it? Just the quality of the politicians is so not great. It's what you were kind of saying about the post office, where you're not pulling talent from other places.
Yeah, you just...
experiences.
You can't really do that for a leadership of a political party, that you do actually have to pick one of the people on the team.
But it's more like in the initial recruitment bit, so pull someone in when they were like 30. They'd actually worked and done a lot of stuff, and then sort of train them up in the politics bit, and there you go. Because that's kind of what Nicola did. I mean, Nicola was a lawyer for years.
Yeah, she was an SNP activist all that time, though.
Yeah, balanced with real world experience thing. So that's why I was quite happy when Mary announced that she was going, because I felt that she's getting out at the right age where you can now have a life where you're not going to be defined by this forever. You'll be going
to do something
learn a whole bunch of new skills, and I wouldn't be
get a proper job.
Yeah, get a real job.
Because Westminster's such a weird place to work, from what I can gather. I mean, really, really strange. Weird hours, weird customs.
Yeah.
You've got fucking pubs in your workplace, subsidised pubs in your workplace.
Yeah.
What?
Also, if you were normal and then you were into that environment, it would be a very terrible state of affairs, because you would be so horrified and disgusted. You're like, I could use a drink, actually.
Yeah, you imagine a lot of the time you've got votes that are late and things like that. So you end up, your dinner is a chip roll and a fucking pint of beer before you're going back into voting. I mean, the whole lobbies thing is ridiculous as well. The way they've all got to troop through the fucking side rooms to vote. There was parallel votes taking place in Holyrood and Westminster, and it took all evening at Westminster, and it took them about 10 minutes in Hollywood because it's press a button, right, next round. Whereas there, they've all got to keep fucking trooping through doors.
The Westminster group have got their own problems as well, like that one defection to the Conservatives.
That's an issue with regards to internal selection procedures and things like that, just not being run properly. And her branch party have wanted shot of her for years because she's fucking space bats. Like,
it's probably two things. The first one is the vetting process for people coming in. I think like the bar is in hell in terms of who we're accepting, and this comes back to the general idea that Salmon's early doing, which is it's a broad church, and therefore we're not really identifying, well, here are the values and you need to stick within these values to be identified as an SNP. From the beginning, I was actually very against the idea of piling everybody into the one club. You cannot sustain that. Whereas if we'd had more of a setup of like, there's the Greens, there's like the SNP kind of in the middle bit, you get the Socialists, you get Libertarian, you get more of that broad church, but everyone's in their place. I think that's a long-range movement. Trying to put everyone in one party, maybe in hindsight, wasn't a great move. The second problem, of course, was a lot of people that signed up for this probably thought, I'll just do this for 5 to 10 years tops, and then there'll be a referendum and I'll get my place in history and off I'll go back to the private sector. And I think the dawning realisation that this is not happening anytime soon has been creeping in over the last 5 years.
Yeah.
I'm not convinced by a lot of the SNP that they're actually in it for the long run. I think people like Patrick and Lorna are, because their final goal is not independence. It's a stepping stone to something more. So if you're a Green, you're not just there to kind of get over a finish line and pack it in. And the way that Salmon would talk about independence, that's how it always comes across. A lot of the SNP, I think once they win, that's it. I don't think they're committed to actually seeing the project to completion, if you like. Would you have it in you to actually formulate a government, cross-party government, and stay there 5 to 10 years after we voted yes? And that's where I don't see that personally, and I think that's where a lot of the leadership is wobbling, because I think that's what you need now, because we know it's not going to be just round the corner. I mean, Nicola's obviously packed it in, she's gone, and I think there's a lot of the elder ones that have just gone, right, that's it, we're done. And I think what you're left with is people that came in at the height of all the 2014 yada 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 stuff, and it was all hoo-ha, flags, and boy, I feel super popular and cool. But whether or not they're actually going to have it in them to see it right the way through.
I know. I mean, yes, you're potentially right. I mean, I think there's a lot of headbangers who they just want a referendum.
Because they don't actually want to do the job. These are people that would not have chosen probably to be a politician when they were at school. They've fallen into it because of independence cause. That's why.
Ash Reagan. So did you watch 2012 and W1A at all?
What?
2012 and W1A sitcoms. 2012 was based on the committee that's getting the Olympics ready.
Oh, did Jessica?
Yeah.
She was in the.
Yeah.
That's why I know
yeah.
what it is.
Her character in that, who's a complete fucking idiot. And that was all I could see when I heard Ash Reagan blathering on her nonsense. She talked about the independence readiness thermometer.
Yes.
Yeah, and what we're kind of trying to say is it's kind of like a dynamic thing. It's constantly in motion, but also what we're saying is launch sequence has commenced.
But what we're looking at here is an idea so good, you don't just want to marry it, you want to take it home and fuck it.
Probably a bit melodramatic.
It totally is mega dramatic.
Yeah, I'm sure it is, but how does it work exactly?
Okay. Okay, so here's the thing. So the thing with the clock is, the thing is, here's what we do with this. So here's the thing with the clock. Here's the thing with this. The thing with stuff like this is, the great thing about the clock is that it's counting backwards.
Backwards in time or backwards in numbers?
Yeah, sure. Either. I mean, both.
Okay, guys, we don't whack this raccoon first time. We're looking at a total crap fest.
Yeah, sure.
No question.
Guys, we're chewing sourdough here. Pull out.
You what?
So, guys, here's the thing with this. We've been going for like 3 hours here, right? We're nailing jelly to the hothouse wall.
What? You get bandwidth on this before the travel advice goes out. You've got maple syrup on your waffle from the get-go.
I'm sorry, what is she talking about?
Oh, don't look at me.
What's not to understand, guys?
Well, you love.
Yeah, you.
Okay, so I'm you.
Okay, so what do I got here? I got churches and I got bells. Okay, so that's a bum hand I got dealt right off the bat.
No, but church bells is what this...
No, I'm you now. You don't need to say stuff.
Oh, okay.
Judaism.
Muslim.
No, we've had that already.
I don't think so.
Well, it's always possible you haven't been listening.
No, I totally have. You've got Islam, you've got...
Well, there you go.
No, Muslimian, duh.
Right.
Muslim's kind of like the main shit here, you know?
Okay, the last thing I want to be is picky about this, but as far as I'm aware, the definition of a Muslim is one who believes in Islam.
No.
I mean, am I right or am I right?
Well, that's...
I'm right, okay?
This is meant to be the best of you. And you're kind of looking at it going, oh, I mean, even the best one is like, it's all right.
Well, the thing is, I think we all thought Angus Robertson was going to stand, and he didn't. Yeah. And I suspect that he didn't because he knows that this is not the time. There's going to be some work to do, and it's going to be shit, and you're going to get nothing but pelters. So let's just let someone that's fine, it's absolutely fine, do that bit. And when we've got through the hard bit, somebody possibly a little bit more than fine. Thing is, do you know what? I went to the conference and Humza's speech was absolutely brilliant and it was really, really good. And he was doing that whilst he was dealing with an enormous amount of personal family fucking tragedy with what was going on in Gaza. His missus gave a speech about Gaza to us and I was really bowled over with it. I thought there's a slight Michelle Obama factor here where I think actually you should be the leader. I think you're actually better. She's really something.
As I said, that on all the Gaza stuff, which I'm not criticising at all, it's just more the sort of day-to-day, the boring bits. Nicola always struck me as someone that really loves the boring bit. If Scottish independence was not even a factor, if we were already an independent country, she strikes me as somebody that would still have gotten into politics because she's just that dull. And I think all the kind of day-to-day stuff, she actually really liked all that. Yeah, the silly drama and arguing on the telly, but
she's not interested at all.
But all the really dull stuff that normal people would hate, that's just, I couldn't get enough of that. And I think that's probably been extremely frustrating to be heads of a group of people that feel completely the opposite. That, you know, you can see it in the leadership thing. They're all gunning for each other, getting really like King Kong banging on the chest in front of the TV and all that, and getting really about it. But when it comes down to the dull bit, that's the bit where you're like, I wouldn't trust any of you to do that stuff to a very high standard. The bread and butter boring bit tends to, when the SNP make mistakes, that's when the fall down tends to occur. And I think it just is the quality of people that we're bringing in. I don't know how you correct that.
I mean, the problem is that people who are attracted to politics now in this environment must be roasters. Yeah. You know that Mitchell and Webb sketch about The Apprentice? Mm-hmm. Yeah, this isn't very interesting, is it? Like competent people challenging each other for a job. This isn't really working as well as we thought. I know. What if instead we got arseholes? Yeah. Idiots and arseholes. But how will we get people to go on? Well, after the first series, only idiots will apply. Yeah. It'll make the selection process easier.
Nicola, she more or less said that. It was just like, oh yeah, this is not what I fucking joined up to like 20 years ago, whatever it would have been. It's become some horrible monster now and I just don't get it and that's why I'm stopping. Yeah. But the question, of course, that raised was, well, who's still staying behind then? And people that have joined during the height of that monster, which a lot of the youth of the SNB have done, it would raise questions.
To me, this is to do with how we're doing politics in this country and probably in most countries, and that's to do with political journalism. There needs to be a sea change in the way that sort of stuff is presented and reported upon, because actual scandals fall by the wayside while we're talking about Boris Johnson's jogging outfits. And we need to be better than that.
Is it the mainstream media? Is it them being shit? Or is it, has social media pushed them in a shitty direction?
No, it's them being shit.
See, that's my take on it.
To me, people moaning about social media is just like people moaning about video nasties and PlayStation games and shit like that. Social media is whatever you make it. It's who you follow. It's how you choose to use it. It's just a tool. That's all it is. and complaining that it's a cesspit. Well, who shat in it? You did. If it's a cesspit, we're all responsible. You can be better.
Our cesspit. Regular media, that's more...
Nobody asked them to dumb themselves down because of social media. They did that because they were chasing something that they thought they needed to get.
If things are just ticking over and they're going well, and we've got boring, competent but boring people in charge doing stuff, there's no stories, there's no nothing, there's no energy to it, so it becomes...
Well, yes, but the story should actually be what they're doing, not what they're saying.
But because no one can really write excitingly anymore about anything, and they can't talk, so you have a situation where it's very difficult to talk about politics unless you can do that, because you have to take stuff that's incredibly fucking boring and present it in a manner where it becomes very interesting. And that's part, to me, of the job a journalist should do. But the writing quality is poor, the presentation is poor, but the stories are so fucking insane. So it means the journalists don't really have to do as much.
Yes.
They just have to point at the monkey running into the wall and go, look how fucking ridiculous that is. And like, that is most of the news now. It's just watching a bunch of fucking idiots running into walls and these journalists going, it's all a bit terrible, this, isn't it?
Faith Charles commentating on Takeshi's Castle.
And we've got a winner! A successful stormer of Takeshi's Castle, he can't believe it! We have got a winner on Takeshi's Castle, hold the front page! Hold my calls, I can't talk to anybody! What do they win though? Absolutely nothing!
We have that in our own movement. Like, the National's quite a good reflection, actually, of that.
I mean, if you'd wanted to make the National properly successful, what you would do is use all of the main content from the Herald. So all of the stuff that's nothing to do with independence, have all of that news reporting in it, and then some independence favouring columnists to do that bit.
Because that was always the thing when we started up doing this podcast. We never officially said this. It wasn't like that's the mission statement. But from the very beginning of all this stuff, back to Parody Account, it was always, it has to appeal to everybody, because that's how you increase the size of the audience and the movement, the extension. Whereas, when you're not aiming for that, it's like the Yes Bar was another one of these things where I remember there was discussion about, like, if you support Scottish independence, you should support this bar. And I'm like, no, it has to be a good bar first. And the paper's exactly the same way. It has to be, first and foremost, a really fucking good newspaper that happens to support Scottish independence.
Yes.
Then the public conscious, it becomes, right, high quality thing, support this thing. Right, now I'm going to support that thing. Whereas a lot of the movement, it's almost like if you just wear the t-shirt, and it's like the SNP itself is kind of like this. If you look at us, we're for independence, we must be right, we must be great. And it's like, no, you have to be good at the job, and then create the association between good quality work, good quality product, and the brand. And it's all gone the inverse way now.
There isn't any great deal of point in reading a newspaper that agrees with you.
Yeah.
You should read the ones that don't. Because you'll find the flaws in your own argument, and you'll also find what the other side is saying, which is what you actually need to know. There's no point talking to your mates.
There's the conservative media is reflective of the same idea, that they're not really, from what I understand, they're not really increasing the size of their audience. If anything, actually, it's going the opposite way. I mean, the Daily Mail and things like that seem to be losing money.
If they're not making money, why do they exist? They exist for some other reason instead, don't they? Because they don't exist for nothing.
Yeah.
To go back to the post office thing briefly, one of the postmasters that mentioned Lee Castleton, the post office was pursuing him for something like £25,000 roughly, and they spent £250,000 on legal fees pursuing that money. So it obviously doesn't make financial sense that they did that. So obviously they weren't buying the £25,000 worth of money they were spending. They were buying something else instead. They were buying the result that they were going to use as a stick to beat other postmasters with. In much the same way, if the Sun doesn't make money, if the Independent, owned by a Russian oligarch's son, doesn't make money, if these things don't make money, what are they for? They're for something else. And that's what we should be asking. It shouldn't actually be allowed for a newspaper to not make money. It should either be profitable or not. And if it's not profitable, it should probably go before some sort of board of assessment to see what it's actually doing instead. I mean, the Telegraph has gone bust. I think it's getting sold to the Saudis.
The upside to this might be that eventually this is all just going to collapse because actually there isn't any demand for it to begin with.
Well,
and so it's so long these things can sustain without producing actually good content.
There's this snake eating its own tail sort of situation whereby the newspapers are getting produced in order to make front pages that the BBC reports on that then becomes the news.
Yeah.
The BBC stopped doing the papers a lot of the time, I think, so it's only Sky doing it now, and I think that's actually probably a good thing because they're veering right in coverage merely by showing what's on the front pages of UK newspapers because UK newspapers are almost all run by mentalists. Absolutely.
I'm just thinking, it's not an SNL sketch with Andy Kaufman counterpoint, and it's just him arguing with himself. Whenever I watch the newspapers done on Sky, that is what it's like. It's just so many people drowned in sea today, and it'll be like, and now we go to the left-wing person, and she'll be like, it's really terrible, those people have drowned. And then the right-wing guy's like, they fucking deserve to drown. And like, that's it.
It's the GB News sort of factor. They're not making any money. They're not there to make money. That's not the purpose of them. So you can withhold your advertising if you want. That's not going to make a damn bit of difference. They're there for a different purpose.
I think it's interesting how many MPs appear on GB News.
I think it's interesting on how many MPs don't need the money, so why are they there?
Yeah.
You don't need the money and you don't need the arse, so what are you there for?
Well, it's like we talked about that years ago about, SNP people appearing on RT, not just Salmon having a show on it, but just being on RT itself. Should have been on principle. You do not agree to do spots with them. That's not a good idea.
Yeah. One of the problems with that was that because the coverage of the independence movement was so poor by the BBC, people felt so disenfranchised, and RT were there handing out free samples, as it were, to lure people in. And once people had stopped watching the BBC and started watching that, they could get an awful lot of other piss fucking dribbled into their ear. And that's where you end up with independent supporters going absolutely fucking mental and thinking everything's a big fucking plot to take down Salmon and this, that and the other. And it's,
They see a lot of folk falling in that trap of the enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of thing.
Yeah.
In politics these days, where like,
it's not true. The enemy of your enemy is the enemy of your enemy. That's it. Yeah.
It's like RTO, and they don't like Westminster, and we don't like them as well. So it must be in our team.
The Alba thing is infuriating. It's just like, look, you're getting 2% of the votes. Just fuck off. All you're doing is potentially letting a Tory in the occasional seat. You're a bunch of roasters.
Yeah, less than like 3% is like margin of error. It's like
it's exactly
that many people could have accidentally put the cross in that pot just by reading the thing wrong.
Yeah, it's just so what someone would do, because apart from being not the SNP, I can't actually really decipher exactly what Alba even fucking is. I mean, I'm defining it as a sort of like right-wing version of the SNP, but even then, you're not very left-wing. It's like, but are you?
No, you're not.
Yeah.
You're fucking actual warriors.
It is such a good encapsulation of his inability, I think, to sell his own stuff as opposed to just being anti the other thing. And that's the problem with a lot of the SNP, the people they've brought on board, is that these are actually protesters. They're just people that want to stand with the sign and go down with this sort of thing. And they don't actually have the skill set required to lead and formulate their own ideas to go, here's a better way of doing it. And then people go, that's a lot better. We'll just naturally move over there. We're kind of like a Mexican standoff situation with politics, where that's what they're all doing, pointing a gun at each other, but no one's actually conveying the here's how we get out of the mess bit. Here's the solution, I have the answer. It's just all, I'm being defined by what I'm not as opposed to what I am.
Yeah, it's true. It's like some of the things that they say about the SNP are actually you know, we probably agree with some of the criticisms. But it's like, right, what are you going to do? A readiness thermometer? It's like, what is your alternative?
Yeah, it's like, of all things to go after. Yeah, exactly. There would be so many actually normal critiques. We can't do the Nicola Sturgeon episode because you all know why we can't do it at the moment. But there are so many normal, sane things you could say gently as constructive criticism about her time as First Minister or career, whatever. And instead of picking up on that, it has to be, she's a secret lesbian that's stealing money or some nonsensical plot.
I was throwing irons out of the window at the Balmoral Hotel.
Yeah, and how she's stitching up her former boss and that. Rather than just being a simple thing of, do you reckon after Brexit happened that she sort of went, right, we're doing an referendum next year, was that a badly timed decision? Which would be a fair criticism, a normal thing you could say. And there's tons of them the whole way along, but instead it's this sort of mad devil woman kind of approach. And you're seeing the same thing happen with Humza now, where when we're all going, he's fine, which, you know, that invites the critiques of because he isn't fine, maybe there's stuff he could be doing better, but we're not accusing him of partaking in conspiracies or anything like that, you know.
I tell you what, Humza being leader makes it really, really easy to find people to block on Twitter. It's really, really easy. You go onto any tweet of Humza and you can find at least a dozen people to block in 20 seconds. It's really useful. I mean, it cleans up your timeline no end.
And they're all right at the top of the replies as well, because they've all got blue ticks.
The media coverage is definitely the core of the issue. I think that now having normal discussions is just out. And that's why Nicola stood down. So I don't know what the answer to any of this is, but I thought it was worth observing anyway.
Should we talk about aliens?
After we talk about aliens.
Hello, children. It's fucking Santa Claus here. Ho, ho, fucking ho. And yeah, you heard right, kids. The gang will be back in 2024 with an episode discussing aliens and unidentified aerial phenomena, or whatever the fuck they're calling them these days. But until then, if you'd like to support the podcast, you can send a one-time donation on PayPal. So, you know, show some fucking Christmas spirit and send these idiots some fucking money. Link in the description. Now, if you'll excuse me, there's a lot of work to be done on this North Pole tonight. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Fuck the Tories.